Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. And today we are going to be doing yet another Cat Who book, and the end is slowly looming into... No, it's not. It's not getting particularly close. We are running up close to the end of the series proper, but there's still one cookbook and 2 additional books, and there's still 3-4 books left. So no, we're not really that close to the end of the series. This particular Cat Who book is The Cat Who Talked Turkey. This picture is not very good because I took it with a camera and I'm very bad with cameras. So that's the cover of my edition, but very, very dark because it's a shiny cover, so I couldn't turn on the flash. And, photography when you're trying to do indirect lighting on something with a shiny surface can be incredibly large amounts of trouble. Now, as far as the turkey thing goes, I frankly feel very much like the turkeys are a non sequitur within the book. Some turkeys come walking out of the woods, and Qwillerish sees them, and then he asks people about them, and it turns out that they had been hunted into regional extinction about, 50 years before, but apparently some turkeys had come back, and he sees them a couple times, and that's kind of about it. It's almost... It feels a little bit like those human interest stories in the news, the ones where they just sort of out of nowhere, after all of the usual stuff that goes on the news, decide to tell you about somebody who won a local contest for silly hats. The turkeys feel a lot like that. In this particular book, the big background event, the big background event in this is that the town of Brr, Brrr, that's actually how it's spelled. It's the premise, the idea in the book behind Brr was that there was some sort of a spelling error when the town was first officially named, and everybody there just liked it so much because it was actually the coldest spot in the region that they just left the town name alone, and so it's Brr Township. And it's celebrating its bicentennial, and Qwill gets asked to help with the festivities. That particular help takes a form that brings us back to the cat who went into the closet, if I am recalling correctly offhand. That is, remember when Qwill did his one-man show and Hixie Rice helped him with it, and it was the big burning of Pickaxe County or whatever it was? He gets asked to do another one-man show, and so he does, and this one is, I suppose, to contrast with the last one, literarily speaking, this isn't about a massive wildfire that destroyed the area 150 years before. This is about a massive snowstorm that ripped through the area and destroyed everything. And so he does this solo show, during which he winds up meeting a young woman who is kind of an awful person. Her grandmother wants her to settle down and get married, and while I am in eminent sympathy with somebody who decides that she or he doesn't want to, settle into the family home and take over the family position and get married and have lots of babies because that's what grandma wants, she's really, really awful about it. And, she's a manipulative and selfish and self-centered, and there's a word that I'm looking for that's not particularly coming to me, not mercenary, but extremely greedy. Avaricious, that would be it. And so, and she's got this sidekick guy whose job is to drive her around because she has a heart condition that means that she shouldn't be driving. And we don't hear from her directly a lot in the book, but we hear about her tangentially, and Qwill does meet with her in person twice. Once when she's recommended to him to act as sort of the technical help in his one-man show, because his one-man show requires a second person. It's him in front of a desk pretending to read off news items on a radio show that couldn't have existed at the time, um, but we're supposed to pretend for the sake of the show that radio existed. Um, there was a TV show based on that concept. What if television had existed for the last 5,000 years? That was a really, really, really good show. Um, and if I remember the title of it while I'm doing this, I'll let you all know. If I remember by the end of this to put it in the description below, I might even let you know. Um, and then you can all look up illegally uploaded copies of it somewhere on the internet. Not on YouTube, of course. In any event, so the other thing what he does in this show is he just sits there and reads at a desk, but he has pre-recorded voices that he does voices of fishermen or locals or what have you that he pretends to effectively be interviewing himself, so he needs somebody to sit off to the side and press play so that uh, he can actually sound like he's interviewing himself instead of apparently pushing buttons on a tape recorder while he's trying to do the performance. So it's not as engaging a story, I feel, and Qwillerin is quite open about that in the book as well, that he feels it's not as engaging a story. In no small part because his source material, unlike for the Big Burning, the source material is out of the closet that Coco went into, where there are a lot of personal letters by people at the time. So there's, first-hand accounts by people in their own words. Whereas in this, it's just, historical research and not necessarily a lot of first-hand accounts. The major death in this is a shooting that happens on his land, on some of the Klingon lands, out in the middle of nowhere, and it turns out to be Alicia, what's her name, the avaricious granddaughter of the nice lady Edith. And eventually he convinces Edith to not leave the house to Alicia because Alicia's just going to take it and turn it into condominiums anyways. And Qwillerin has a great deal of respect for history. He has a great deal of respect for the idea of preserving important historical things. And so he convinces Edith to leave it to the county as a historical monument, as a potential museum. And at the very end of the book, Alicia decides to, make off with a bunch of expensive stuff and hopes to sell it, and dies as she's driving on the highway. And then her sidekick comes over to Qwillerin's and winds up admitting that he murdered people at Alicia's behest, and then he kills himself, and it's all this is very much one of the problems with this series that I kind of ignore because I enjoy reading about Qwillerin interacting with the cats, because I enjoy reading about Qwillerin's romance with Polly, about the various characters that he runs across, about his little side projects, about the rumors that he starts. Amazingly, he didn't use Ronald Frobnitz, nor did he start a rumor in this story, nor did he even mention he was going to write a book. I'm amazed. None of these three things, which happen in almost every single book in this series, happened. Seriously, I keep on waiting for the Ronald Frobnitz thing to come back and bite him in the butt. But what happens, but it's that Coco gives hints. He gives hints by knocking books off shelves. He gives hints by, yowling at time of death. But in this one, yes, he seems to have an obsession and upset with Alice in Wonderland. Yes, he does things that reference, however tangentially, what's going on with Alicia and her sidekick and what's going on in town in general. But Qwillerin doesn't solve it. The villain's sidekick just kind of shows up and says, "Yes, I killed them all. I was being paid to do it. I'm her shooter. It's what I do." Um, and so this book, as much as anything else, reemphasizes that while these are ostensibly mysteries, reading this is much more about much more about the slice of life quality of it. It's more about hearing Polly talking to Qwill about the bookstore because she's just given up on being a librarian, and all of the things she's studying about how to make a bookstore and how to put one together and how to market it and how to do this, that, and the other thing. And it's not that Qwillerin doesn't wonder and think and consider about crimes that are happening in the course of this book. It's that it feels like it takes a back burner as compared to other books in the series. And it's not precisely a criticism, although it is to an extent a criticism because these are labeled and marketed as mysteries. But it's almost about warning, it's almost about letting potential readers know that this is a book that is not about the mystery. It's about Qwillerin and his cats. And sometimes about Qwillerin's about Qwillerin's columns, which, again, take a bit of a back seat in this particular book. And interestingly enough, of course, this is one of the books that once again bucks the usual theme of the series of Qwillerin going someplace and meeting new people. The new people are the ones who effectively come to him in the course of the book. But as I've said before, I think that his lack of movement in these later books as compared to the earlier ones is very much reflective of older age and his contentment with where he is and how he is at this time in his life. I'll admit, these later books I have less and less to say about, not just because, not because they're less interesting, but because series like this have a certain sameness to them, a certain repetition, a certain predictability. And when you're dealing with a series that has this kind of sameness and predictability, it's one of the reasons that you read it. It's the same reason that people go to see rom-coms, that people go to see action flicks. You know how it's going to end. You know your boy and girl meet cute is going to lead to a happy ending and lovey-doveyness. You know that the action hero is going to win and there will be explosions. The only question is how you get there by the end. Well, you read these books for the same reason, really. And I think that's everything, so I will see you all next week.